Okay, hi everyone, and I think we're live. For some reason, the live counter usually is at sort of 7 to 10 seconds when this starts, but it was straight at 46, 47 seconds on this one for some reason. So hopefully you haven't got a big, huge gap at the start with me just sitting here or something. But apologies if you have. So for those new here, my name is Nicki. And what I've been doing for the last, about a year now, is a monthly series on my YouTube channel, which is looking at my language learning. Language learning is one of my principal hobbies, something I really love. And so I've been doing a series of what is eventually going to be 18 videos. We're up to number 12 so far, so we'll be going until the end of the year, in which I talk about my language learning. I did a few introductory ones. Towards the end, I'll be doing some sort of wrap-up ones, looking at how my language learning went this year, that kind of thing, plans for the future. But in the meantime, we're in the middle of the sort of run of episodes, if you like, and we're looking at each of the languages I've been studying in turn. And today it's time for Korean. So, sorry, I'm getting a bit of a glare here. I don't know if I can fix that. No, that's as low as it'll go. Sorry about that. Let me just shift forward a little bit. There we go. So, yes, Korean. So I've been studying Korean for, I'd say, a couple of years now. Perhaps I should start off with how I got started. So Korean for me was an interesting one because last time I spoke about Japanese, and I'd taken up Japanese because I'd started watching a lot of anime, reading manga, and I became interested in the language and wanted to do some more. So I started that in the August, I'd say it was. And I think that was probably August 2019, that will have been. And so I was doing Japanese, and that was my principal focus for about 6 months. And then it was around the start of 2020, I think, just in time for the pandemic, actually, wasn't it? That I first watched a K-drama. I have to say, and I have to confess, I had a slightly negative view of K-dramas before I watched them. And this was because I had in my mind that they were really soapy and kind of like, daytime American and English TV. And so when people talked about K-dramas, I was like, oh, no, that's not my sort of thing, like The Bold and the Beautiful in Korean kind of thing. Days of Our Lives is that another one, I think. And that's not my sort of thing. So I assumed that they weren't for me. But then on Netflix one day, it recommended to me a K-drama called Black. And this is a fantasy series, essentially about Grim Reapers. And it's also a sort of murder mystery crime drama at the same time. And it recommended it. I thought the premise sounded interesting, so I decided tentatively to give it a go. And I absolutely loved it. I thought it was wonderful. And pretty much all I watch these days is K-drama. I mean, I watch the odd sort of cheesy rom-com one. I tend to stay away mostly from those more sort of melodrama types. I watch the odd sort of quirky rom-com, but I watch a lot of the sort of sci-fi, fantasy, and historical drama side of K-drama. So I started watching K-drama, and my husband joked, "Oh, you're not going to start learning Korean, are you?" And I was still deep in Japanese, and I said, no, I'm not going to learn Korean. Excuse me, I needed a drink then. And that lasted about 3 or 4 weeks, I think. And then I was already doing some Japanese on Duolingo, and I thought, oh, well, I might as well just do a bit of Korean on Duolingo. I won't take it too seriously, just for a bit of interest. And I soon got sucked into the Korean learning vortex, as often happens with me and languages, I know. So initially, as with Japanese, I was completely self-studying. So I used Duolingo at first, and I just worked through that course and made some notes. Then I started to branch out into other resources, books and other websites and things. So I thought I'd share with you a few of the books I bought fairly early on. So one of them that I grabbed was this one, Practical Korean. It's a Tuttle release. And I have a sort of love-hate relationship with this book. It has an easy way to quickly reference very basic grammar. So if I just want to double check something, then it is quite quick and easy to use. However, there is a huge amount, I don't know if I just show you this page. So you can see here that we have, sorry, too far. Right, I can't see where I'm pointing. Here we go. So here, where it's in bold here, this is all Romanized Korean. Okay. Then in the middle column, it's the English, and then the actual Hangul Korean in sort of fainter type at the side. And this is the only issue I have with Tuttle. Tuttle have got some really great books for Asian language learning, but they do tend to prioritize the Romanization over the actual script. And the actual script is usually there as well. But as you can see here, it's the Romanization that's in bold that really leaps out at you when you look at the page, which once you've learned Hangul is a bit annoying. So that's the only issue that I had. I mean, I actually used this book as a bit of a notebook initially, and you can see here I've written a whole load of handwritten notes on things that were related to a similar topic that I found out later on. So I've got a lot of record in this book, so I'd never get rid of it, but it's probably fine if you're just starting out and you're still getting used to Hangul, and as just a quick early reference. But once you're a little bit more advanced, it's less helpful, I would say. And the same is true for the other book that I also got from Tuttle, which is Basic Korean. It's the same issue. The Romanization is really heavily prioritized. But there are some useful grammar bits. There are some sort of scenarios. There's audio with it. So if you like learning sort of by a kind of topic with lots of sort of sample dialogues and things like that, these books are not too bad for that. At the same time, I always, of course, buy my Verb book. So I haven't brought it out with me, actually, but I have the 500 basic Korean verbs, which obviously it's a really quick, handy reference guide. You just want to check a conjugation. And it's got all the obvious common verbs in, apart from ita, actually. I had to print that off and put it in as an insert because for some reason that one's not in there. And you think it would be. It's a pretty major everyday verb, but who knows? The next book I bought, again, this is very similar to the books I was buying for Japanese, all from Tuttle. It's kind of like a series. They've got it all for all the languages. So let me get that in frame a bit more. So Essential Korean Grammar. This one I like in a lot of ways. It takes you through everything, beginner to advanced. This one, unlike the Japanese one, which was laid out alphabetically, Japanese alphabetically, by item. So if you didn't know the item, you could look up, if you said, oh, what does des mean? You could look it up in there. You'd find it really quickly, easily. But if you just wanted to know, what are the different ways to say because and which one do I want in this context, then it doesn't work as well. This one is the opposite, actually. This one is organized by topics. So, I mean, if I just go to the index here, it's like, grammar points, agreement, disagreement, asking questions, linking sentences, cause and effect, how to say so, how to say because. So if you just want, as in the scenario I told you just now, you want to say because in a sentence and you're like, I can't remember which one is the correct way to use for this kind of sentence, it will take you straight to a section. All the different ways of saying because will be there, and you can see which one is most suitable for you based on the notes. So for that, it's really good. But in the opposite way, you can look up. There is an index. So if you find something that you want to look up, you see a grammar point, then you can find most of them. Sometimes it just depends how you're searching, because they might be written in a slightly different way than how you're seeing it in the index. But there is an index, so you can search both ways in this book, although going by topic is easiest. But it is a good resource. I have referred to this one a fair bit already, and I think I probably will do so more as I move more into the intermediate. I'm still at sort of a high beginner, I'd say, level. So once I move more into intermediate, then I think that will be even more useful. So those were my early starting books. And as I said, I also use Duolingo. I then used a website called How to Speak Korean, I think it was. I've stopped using it now, which is why it's not clear on my mind, but it was basically a grammar website, and I worked my way through the whole of it and made notes. However, I've heard since that some of the information in it isn't 100% accurate, and I've heard people say that they've pointed that out to the owner and he's not always very keen to amend and things. So I've kind of done what I wanted to do with that resource, which was just make notes, and there isn't much more you can do with it. He does have some on Memrise, some vocab lists. If you're looking for vocab flashcards, then he does have those. But I think if you're looking for a resource that's more sort of hands-on with exercises and things to test you, then it does have some of that. To be fair, it does have some sort of quizzes and things like that, but it really is very heavy grammar based. So if that's not you, if you like more dialogues and things, then it's probably not the best resource for you to pick. In the meantime, I found one called Dom and Hio, which I would recommend. It's quite fun. It's basically, I'd say it's essentially infographics, but there are really, really cute infographics on different topics with vocab and bits and pieces. So if you like that sort of visual, arty learning, sort of little comical drawings and things, then it's definitely worth checking out. They also have quite a fun Korean drinking game one, where you take sips depending on what happens in K-drama. And I created my own version of one as well, actually, because I kind of like theirs, but I was like, oh, they didn't think about like when this happens and when this happens, all these tropes. So I made my own version as well. At this point, I also found a couple of YouTubers that I followed and went through all their sort of material so far. I mean, I'm really big, when I first start learning the language, I do a lot of just listening and note taking, and then I move on to trying to use the language more. I like to get a good basis and a good overview first. So I started off with two YouTubers essentially. The first of these was Korean Unnie. Now Korean Unnie she stopped posting so much these days, but all her other stuff is still on there. So she's done some really good videos. Her explanations are really clear. She does a mix of sort of vocab, grammar, and just sort of taking you around Seoul, how to use the subway and things like that. So that's really great. And also Go Billy Korean as well. He's my favorite Korean language learning YouTuber. His videos have more of a focus on grammar in general, but his explanations are really clear. And because he learned Korean, he's been learning Korean for more than 10 years, I think 12, 13 years or something. It might even be more than that now. In fact, I think it is more than that now. His wife's Korean and he's lived there for a time. And what I like about his explanations are, because he learned as an native English speaker learning Korean, he can kind of anticipate where stumbling blocks are going to come and where you're going to go, but what about this? And he's always got that answer there ready during the lecture. So he's doing a series at the moment on honorifics and speech levels, which is really, really useful as well. Now he has a YouTube channel, he has a website, so there's so much content he puts out, which is awesome. And at this point, I was still studying on my own. And then I'd looked up online the Korean Cultural Centre, which is in Sydney. Now, I'm not in Sydney, I'm in Adelaide. And I saw they did classes and I was really keen, but you had to be in Sydney to take the classes because they were in person at the Cultural Centre. But then along came COVID and lockdowns. And at this point, they moved to Zoom classes and they were opened up to all states. So anyone in Australia could join. Now, these classes it's the Korean Cultural Centre is here in Australia, but it's linked with the King Sejong Institute. And there are King Sejong Institutes all around the world. There's one in London, in Paris, a couple in America, I think. So wherever you are, you would probably be able to find one near you. And they offer these classes for free. And they have textbooks, which you can either view online for free or you can buy. And they run the classes, which go 12 weeks at a time per term. Then you sign up for the next term. I understand in some countries that the very first beginner class is really popular and there's quite a waiting list. But for me, I was lucky and I managed to get into it straight away. And I've been doing those classes for, let me see, 1-1 and 1-2, 2-1, 2-2. I'm in 3-1 now, so for 5 terms. So essentially for a year, I've been doing those classes. No, more than that, year and a half-ish. I can't remember anymore. It's 3 terms a year. So yes, nearly coming up for 2 years actually. Now, I really like these classes because although at first it was perhaps a little bit boring in a way, because we spent the first term mainly just learning Hangul, which I'd already learnt. And even now, a lot of the grammar patterns we're doing are ones I've already come across. But what I love is that I get that interaction, because learning on your own, you don't get to practice properly in the same way you do in a class environment. So I like having that opportunity to speak, to answer questions and see that I'm getting the right answers. The rest of the class are great fun. The teachers are really nice. So I'm definitely planning to continue. There are actually 8 textbooks for the Kian Sejong Institute. Each textbook is usually done over 2 terms, which is why we have the 1-1, 1-2, then 2-1, 2-2. But in Australia, unfortunately, they only offer up to 4. So I don't know why. We've never been able to find out. The teachers don't really know, but they only do the first half, which kind of takes you to low intermediate. But I am planning to continue and go all the way through everything they do offer, which will take me through till towards the end of next year, as long as I don't miss any terms. So that's my plan. I really love those classes, but I am still self-studying at the same time. So I have a few more books that I have bought. This one is my most recent purchase, actually. It's the Korean Pronunciation Guide. And I haven't finished working through it yet, but this book looks like it's going to be really useful. It talks about basic pronunciation, but then it goes through also all the pronunciation rules when certain letters meet and sounds change. And that's the first half of the book. And then the second half of the book, you get some sort of text, little stories, which there's audio you can download from the website and you can hear them say it, and then you practice saying it, and it pulls out any sort of places where there are sound changes and things to be aware of. So it actually makes kind of reading practice, speaking practice, and listening practice all in one book. And it looks really great anyway. I haven't got as far as the second half yet, but I'm really looking forward to working on that more as soon as I have time. And the other one I bought that is more for the future, I guess, is 500 Common Korean Idioms. I really love idioms. And this one's got some really great collection. It's handy because you can look up, there's an index by Topik. The only thing is, if you come across an idiom, let me just look. Oh, they did put them in alphabetical order, actually. As I said, I haven't looked at this book a lot yet. So if you come across an idiom, there's an index, a list of entries at the front in Hangul alphabetical order. So if you find one, you're like, what does that mean? You can look it up quite easily, actually. And then it works by topics. So if you're looking for an idiom for that perfect situation, then you can find one. But as I said, this is really more a sort of intermediate to advanced level book. But I just wanted to have it ready, and I'm looking forward to using it in the future. And the last few books I'll just mention quickly that I bought are for reading practice. First of all, this one, which I think is wonderful, which is Korean Stories for Language Learners. And it's all traditional folk tales. And it's bilingual. You have the Korean on one side, the English on the other. And they get progressively harder as you work through the book. So the first few, it just teaches you a few things like, 안녕하세요 and all that kind of thing. And then it moves into stories. And as you can see, like, this is one of the earliest stories in the book, and it really is just a paragraph. But then by the end, you're working up to stories that are sort of 6-7 pages long and things like that. So I've nearly finished. I'm about 3/4, just over, through this book. And I've been really enjoying it. And you do sort of feel like you're accomplishing something as you move through increasingly difficult pieces. And you start to recognize some vocab, particularly the things like, once upon a time, and all the openings that are very formulaic. And some of the vocab maybe is not something you'd use every day, but it's still, you get used to reading, to seeing different grammar patterns and things like that. So this is definitely really good. And this is a beginner to intermediate book. Another one I've bought that I haven't read at all yet is this one, which is Short Stories in Korean. So this is from the Ollie Richards Teach Yourself series. He has books for several languages in this ilk. And this is more for intermediate. So I'm kind of holding this one until I finish the other one. And these books, I've talked about them previously, I think, but I find them okay. I sometimes think a little bit more vocab help is needed. And also I've noticed the stories are actually repeated in some books. So I've got the Icelandic and the Korean one here, and a couple of the stories are the same. So once you've read them in one book, you kind of know the story already. And I think it would have been better if there'd been completely different stories in all the books. But then I guess maybe they're not expecting that many people to buy multiple languages. But that's basically my bookshelf of Korean at the moment. So I recently sent a note to my fellow classmates in my Korean class of what materials I'm using. So I'm just having a quick scan through there. Okay, so I've just got a couple more things to mention. So let me move on to continuing studies now anyway, because we're really definitely at that stage now. So I did Duolingo, I finished that. I bought some books. I started the classes at the King Sejong Institute, Korean Cultural Centre classes. And then I've been looking at what to do next. As I've said in previous videos, I tend to start with grammar quite heavily. I like to really understand how the language works before I move on in it. However, I'm now reaching a stage where I need to start being a bit more active and trying to use what I've been reading about and what I've been learning. So I would mention as well, I've mentioned the King Sejong course, obviously, but other places you can find some Korean courses for free. I've done a few of the MOOCs, massive open online courses, on websites such as Coursera, edX, and Futurelearn. All of them have had Korean courses at different times. Some of them still do. Most of them are beginner classes. So if you just really want to dip your toes in and see if it's for you, most of those you can do the course for free, and you only pay if you want a certificate. So that's really great because you can go through, look at all the resources, learn what you want to learn. But if you're not worried about a certificate, you don't have to pay anything. And the other place that's definitely worth checking out, which I haven't mentioned yet, though it's a really major resource for Korean learners, is Talk to Me in Korean. So this website, you can sign up for a free account and you have access to all 10 levels of their Korean class, which is obviously goes from beginner through to more advanced, high intermediate, low advanced. And it's, as I said, completely free to access those what they call the essential courses. So they do cover grammar, vocabulary, getting you speaking and saying some things. So it's definitely a really good course, and I've whizzed through it really quick, but I'm going to go back through it soon and start kind of just looking at which grammar, start back at the beginning. I want to look at which grammar points can I use with ease. I don't have to think about as soon as I hit one where I wouldn't be able to do it instinctively, then I'll start doing some practice, writing some sentences and things like that. That's my aim. And I have signed up for a 1-year access in December, at the end of December, to the rest of their website, because as well as the essential course, they have a whole load of other courses and bits on there, which are paid content. So I just decided to sign up for the year and just go through it all. I can't afford to keep subscribing every year. So I thought I'll just go through, look at everything, make notes, even if it's too advanced now. And they often have PDFs you can download and things, so I can come back and look at them in the future. So that's what I've done. I've actually just finished. I've managed it in 6 months. So I've got another 6 months now left to review anything I want to review while I've still got the access. Some of the stuff they also post for free on YouTube. So their YouTube channel, they've got a couple of YouTube channels already worth following. They do podcasts, and you can see some of their older beginner podcasts on YouTube and places like SoundCloud. But what they're concentrating on now is really more high intermediate advanced podcasts like Bib and Chat, which are a little bit advanced for me now. But what I'm doing is, while I've got access to the transcripts on the website, I'm copying the transcripts so that I can use them as reading practice later on as I get a bit more advanced. But definitely it's worth taking a look at. A couple of other websites I'll just mention quickly that I use if I just want to check a grammar point are Say Hi Korean and Korean Topik. They've both got some good little, just like one-page bits on different grammar points if you just need to look something up. And lately I've started listening to a couple of other podcasts I found, which are called Essential Korean and A Piece of Korean. And these are a kind of beginner to intermediate level. Sometimes I understand 90% of what they're saying. It depends on the topic. Sometimes it's only 50 to 60%. But I like to try and listen to one of each of those each week. And in terms of YouTube, I think I've covered most of them. But I also do follow one called Learn Real Korean, which I've only started following recently. But they have some quite good topic-based writing and speaking videos. She also does some sort of vocab videos looking at the different ways of saying a certain thing and what the nuances are. The only thing I'd say about this channel is she does speak completely in Korean. Sometimes there have been some English notes on the screen, sometimes not. So you do need to be a little bit more able just to pick out. I can't understand everything she says, but I can usually follow enough to get the gist of what she's telling me, if that makes sense. There's SpongeMind TV, who does some okay listening videos as well. And there's Professor Yoon. His channel is called Professor Yoon's Korean Language Class. And he also posts he does live streams where he answers questions or discusses different grammar points. And he also posts some videos sometimes doing a bit of reading practice, listening practice and things like that. Otherwise, I think we're pretty much coming to the end. So as I said, continuing my studies, I'm working with Talk to Me in Korean stuff at the moment, as well as doing my classes. So we're about a third of the way through this term at the moment for my Korean class. And I'm looking forward to continuing that. We've had a week off this week for a public holiday, but we'll be back again next week. And I'm trying to do a bit more listening at the moment, but I now want to get more active in the next 6 months. And as I said, look at grammar patterns, which ones can I use instinctively, which ones need work, and start trying to write more and practice using those grammar patterns, practice some speaking by reading out what I'm writing, and perhaps look for a speaking partner either later this year or definitely early next year. I watch my K-drama all the time, and I also love Korean musicals. There's some really great Korean musicals out there, not just Korean versions for English ones, but original musicals. And there's a lot of content of that you can find on YouTube, Naver TV, Kakao TV. So I think that's all that I need to say about Korean. I'm really enjoying Korean, actually. I should say sorry, my throat's getting a bit dry. That's better. Yeah, I love Korean, and although I'm doing my other languages, and I've actually just picked up Chinese as well. I know, as if I needed like a 9th one. But in my defense, I have a Chinese sister-in-law, and everyone's been saying to me for a couple of years now, like, why are you doing Korean and Japanese? Why aren't you doing Chinese when you've got a Chinese family member? I mean, the Chinese, I'd say at the moment, I'm not taking it too seriously. I'm just kind of dabbling a bit. But essentially, that's 9 languages I have to fit in now. But of all of them, the one that I'm really most keen to progressing is Korean, because I've really fallen in love with the language and the culture. I was hoping to go to Korea at the end of this month, but unfortunately, those plans fell through when my husband's work commitments changed, and he's got too much he's got to do at that time now. So we couldn't make it, unfortunately. But now that the world is opening up a bit again, I hope we can get there sooner rather than later. Maybe later this year or definitely next year. We'll see how things go. But definitely, I really love Korean, and it's really great that there's so much out there for Korean learning. I guess because of K-Wave, there's been a lot of interest in people learning Korean. And so there's a huge amount. There's a massive paid resources, the books and classes and different things, but there's also such a lot of free content that if you're interested in learning Korean, you can do so just on free content, I would say, because there's so much of it. So if you want to learn Korean, definitely check out some of the places I've mentioned. some will suit certain people better depending on your learning style, but these are definitely all ones that I've used and that I found useful in my personal language learning journey. So it's getting quite long, this video. I'm going to end there, I think. I'll be back next time when I'm going to talk about Icelandic. So that will be a little bit different, and I left that one till last because that's one of my most frustrating language learning experiences, I would say, and you'll find out more next month when I talk about it. But I will end there for now. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again next month to talk about Icelandic. Bye for now, everyone.